Gardener discovers an object buried in her garden with a message. When she opens it, she can't believe the mysteries and revelations that follow. On a bright autumn morning, the sun cast a warm glow over Leora Estelle's cherished garden. The vibrant colors of the leaves painted a picture of nature's beauty, and the scents of blooming flowers filled the air, bringing her a sense of peace. As she knelt in the soft soil, she found solace among the plants she lovingly tended. Each petal, each leaf, had a story, a memory intertwined with her life. Just a little more pruning, Leora murmured to herself, her fingers moving gracefully over the ancient rose bush that stood proudly in the corner. Its gnarled branches spoke of years gone by, of seasons changing and stories whispered in the wind. She felt a connection to it, as if it held secrets she was yet to uncover. Suddenly, her shovel struck something hard. "What on earth?" she gasped, curiosity sparking within her. With a quickening heartbeat, Leora began to dig deeper, her hands working feverishly through the dirt. What she uncovered was a small, rusted chest, half buried and forgotten by time. It seemed to shimmer under the sunlight, calling to her. Leora's breath quickened as she brushed off the dirt and opened the chest. Inside, she found a handwritten letter, the ink faded but legible. As she unfolded the fragile paper, words leapt off the page, weaving a story that transported her to another time. The letter was penned by someone named Eloise, and it spoke of a forbidden love, a choice that lingered painfully in the air. Who was Eloise? Leora wondered, her mind racing. The emotions in the letter were raw and real, filled with longing and heartache that resonated deeply within her. What choice haunted her? She read on, feeling the weight of Eloise's words settle in her heart. "I chose to love him," Eloise had written, "but the world conspired against us. I had to let him go." Leora felt a pang in her chest. This was more than a story, it was a reflection of her own fears. Had she ever truly chosen love in her life? Or had she always followed the paths laid out for her by others? As Leora continued to read, she imagined Eloise's face, the way her heart must have raced when she thought of her beloved. "What happened to them?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. She could sense a connection forming, a thread that linked her life to this woman from the past. Eloise's words echoed in her mind, igniting questions that swirled like leaves caught in the autumn breeze. Leora's fingers trembled as she finished the letter. The chest, now open before her, felt like a portal to a world she had never known. Would she have the courage to uncover more about Eloise, to dive into the depths of a life that once flourished in her own home? With newfound determination, Leora stood up, brushing the dirt from her knees. The garden felt different now, alive with stories waiting to be discovered. She glanced around at the roses, their blooms vibrant against the fading light. "I have to learn more," she declared, her heart racing with excitement and trepidation. "I need to know who you were, Eloise." As she walked back toward the house, the letter clutched tightly in her hand. Leora's thoughts raced. Would uncovering Eloise's story help her understand her own? Would it give her the strength to pursue her desires, to break free from the chains of expectation? The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the garden, but Leora felt a spark within her. The discovery of the chest had changed everything. It was not just a letter, it was a call to action, a chance to unearth the past, and, perhaps, reshape her future. The questions lingered in the air like a sweet perfume, and Leora was ready to follow the scent wherever it led her. Leora Estelle felt a pull towards the past as she sat at her kitchen table. The handwritten letter from Eloise spread out before her. The words echoed in her mind, urging her to discover more about the woman whose heart had poured onto the page. With a deep breath, she decided to delve into Eloise's life. The next morning, Leora headed to the local library. She had heard of archives filled with old records. As she entered the building, The scent of aged paper mixed with wood filled her senses. Leora approached the librarian, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes. "Excuse me, Mrs. Thompson," Leora said, her voice steady yet filled with excitement. "I'm looking for information about a woman named Eloise who lived in my house many years ago." Mrs. Thompson's eyes widened. "Oh, Eloise! She was quite a figure in our town. Let me see what I can find for you." After a few moments, Mrs. Thompson returned with a stack of old newspapers and a faded photo. "Here, this is from the year Eloise was married. She had such a radiant smile, didn't she?" Leora gazed at the photo. Eloise looked so full of life. "What happened to her?" she asked, a hint of sadness creeping into her voice. "Ah, that is a story filled with heartache," Mrs. Thompson replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. "She fell in love with a soldier who went off to war. They were to be married, but he never returned." Leora's heart sank. She felt a deep connection to Eloise, as if she could almost feel the weight of her unfulfilled dreams. "Did she ever find happiness?" she inquired softly. "Not in the way she hoped," Mrs. Thompson replied, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "She lived a quiet life, burdened by loss, but her spirit remained strong. Many admired her for that." With newfound determination, Leora spent the next few days in the archives, poring over records and interviewing elderly neighbors. Each story added a piece to the puzzle of Eloise's life. One afternoon, she visited Mrs. Jenkins, who had lived next door to Eloise for many years. "Eloise was a dreamer," Mrs. Jenkins began, her voice warm with nostalgia. "She always spoke of love and adventure. You could see it in her eyes." "What were her dreams?" Leora asked, eager to learn more. "She wanted to travel, to see the world beyond our little town," Mrs. Jenkins reminisced, a smile breaking through her wrinkles. "But society had different plans for her. There were expectations, you know. She was meant to marry and settle down, like all the others." Leora nodded, feeling a strange kinship with Eloise's struggles. She too felt the pressure of expectations, weighed down by her family's hopes. "Did she ever talk about her soldier?" Leora inquired. "Only in whispers," Mrs. Jenkins said, her voice turning somber. "She loved him deeply. I remember the day he left. Eloise stood at the gate, tears in her eyes, holding a letter in her hand. She never stopped hoping he would come back." As Leora listened, she felt Eloise's pain wash over her. The longing, the fear of unfulfilled love. It was all too familiar. She could see the parallels in her own life. "What did she do after he left?" Leora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "She kept his memory alive," Mrs. Jenkins replied. "She tended to her garden, always planting flowers he loved. It was as if she believed he would return one day." Leora's heart ached at the thought. She had always found peace in her own garden, just as Eloise had. "I think I understand her now," Leora said softly. She was brave in her own way. Mrs. Jenkins nodded, a knowing smile crossing her face. "Yes, dear, and perhaps, in understanding her, you might find the courage to follow your own heart." Those words lingered in Leora's mind as she left Mrs. Jenkins's home. The stories of Eloise began to weave themselves into her own life. She felt a growing urge to confront her own choices and question the path she had been on. With each revelation, Leora realized that she, too, had dreams waiting to be pursued. As she stepped into her garden, she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her, ready to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. Leora stepped into the local historical society, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nervousness. The small building was filled with old photographs and dusty books, each holding stories waiting to be uncovered. As she walked through the narrow aisles, she felt a connection to the past, as if Eloise's spirit lingered in the air. "Can I help you, dear?" An elderly woman behind the desk asked, her voice warm and inviting. "Yes, I'm looking for information about Eloise," Leora replied, her heart racing. "She lived in my home many years ago." The woman's eyes lit up with recognition. "Eloise, What a lovely soul she was. Her story is one of love and loss. She beckoned Leora to sit down, pulling out a few dusty files. She faced many challenges, especially with the expectations of society. Leora leaned closer as the woman began to share. Eloise was deeply in love with a soldier. They had to keep their love a secret because of the pressures from their families. It was a different time back then. Leora nodded, feeling the weight of Eloise's struggles. Did she ever get to be with him? The woman sighed, her eyes clouding with memories. No, dear. He was sent off to war and never returned. That kind of loss changes a person. As Leora listened, she felt a wave of emotions wash over her. She thought of her own fears of unfulfilled love. How did she cope with that pain? She found solace in her garden, the woman said softly. It became her refuge. She poured her heart into every flower and plant, and in doing so, she kept his memory alive. Leora's mind raced as she imagined Eloise tending to her garden, the vibrant colors and scents offering her peace. I can relate to that, she whispered. I often seek comfort in my own garden. The woman smiled gently. Gardens have a way of healing. They remind us of life's beauty, even in the midst of sorrow. As they continued to talk, Leora felt a connection to Eloise grow stronger. She imagined the young woman standing in the same spot, filled with dreams and hopes. What was Eloise like in her final days? Leora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The elderly woman paused, her expression turning serious. Eloise waited for her love to come back. She held on to hope for many years, but as time went on, that hope faded. It was heartbreaking to watch her change. Leora's heart ached at the thought of Eloise's longing. Did she ever express her feelings? Through her letters, yes, the woman replied. She wrote about her love, her regrets, and her dreams. That's how we know her story so well. Inspired, Leora realized that Eloise's words could guide her. I want to read those letters, she declared with newfound determination. I need to understand her journey. The woman nodded, reaching for a worn box filled with papers. These are copies of her letters. Take your time with them. Leora accepted the box, feeling the weight of history in her hands. Thank you so much. You've helped me more than you know. As she left the historical society, the sun was setting, casting a golden light over the town. Leora felt a mix of sadness and hope. Eloise's story resonated deeply within her, reflecting her own struggles with love and societal expectations. Later that evening, Leora sat in her garden, the box of letters beside her. She opened the first letter, her heart racing as Eloise's words came to life. My dearest love, it began, I dream of the day we can be together without fear. With each line, Leora felt as if she was stepping into Eloise's shoes. The pain of separation echoed in her own heart, and she understood the weight of unspoken words. As she read, she realized that Eloise's journey was not just a story from the past. It was a reflection of her own life. Tears slipped down Leora's cheeks as she absorbed the emotions in the letters. Eloise, she whispered, I wish you had found your happiness. But as she wiped her eyes, Leora also felt a spark of courage ignite within her. Eloise's story was a reminder that love, though complicated, was worth pursuing. With a deep breath, Leora resolved to confront her own choices and not let fear hold her back any longer. Leora sat quietly in her favorite spot in the garden, a small wooden bench nestled between the blooming flowers. The sun shone brightly, casting a warm glow over everything. She clutched a second letter she had discovered, one that Eloise had written later in her life. The paper was yellowed with age, but the words danced with life and emotion. As she unfolded the letter, Leora's heart raced. The letter began with an apology. My dearest reader, if you hold this letter, it means I have faced my fears and embraced my heart. Leora could almost hear Eloise's voice, warm and inviting. The letter continued. Life is too short to live in shadows. Love should be cherished, nurtured, and never hidden away. Leora felt a wave of inspiration wash over her. She read the words again, feeling each one resonate deep inside her. I have spent too many years worrying about what others would think, she whispered to herself. Maybe it is time to change that. She closed her eyes, imagining what it would be like to live fully, to love openly, and to pursue her own happiness without fear. As the leaves rustled softly in the breeze, Leora thought of her own life. Have I been living authentically? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The letter urged her to consider her choices. The words flickered in her mind like fireflies, lighting up the dark corners of her doubts. What if I took a step forward? She pondered. What if I reached out to him? The thought of reconnecting with her long-lost love felt both thrilling and terrifying. Memories of laughter and shared dreams filled her heart. She remembered the way his smile could light up the darkest days. What do I have to lose? She said aloud, determination rising within her. She breathed in deeply, the sweet scent of jasmine filling her lungs. With a newfound sense of purpose, Leora stood up from the bench and walked toward the little shed at the edge of her garden. Inside, she found an old box filled with letters and photographs from her past. She rummaged through it, her fingers trembling as she searched for the one letter that could change everything. After a few moments, she found it, a letter from him, filled with promises and dreams. She held it close, feeling the weight of their shared history. Eloise believed in love, she said softly. I should too. With a spark of courage, Leora decided to write her own letter. Sitting at the garden table, she took out a fresh piece of paper and began to write. Dear James, she started, her heart pounding with each stroke of the pen. It has been too long since we last spoke. I think of you often. As her thoughts flowed onto the page, she opened up about her journey, about Eloise, and about the lessons she had learned. Life is a precious gift, she wrote. I want to embrace it fully. I hope you will join me. Leora carefully folded the letter, sealing it with a kiss. This is it, she whispered, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. With the letter in hand, she made her way to the mailbox. As she walked, the vibrant flowers seemed to cheer her on, their colors brightening with each step. You can do this, she encouraged herself, imagining Eloise's words ringing in her ears. When she reached the mailbox, Leora took a moment to breathe. The sun warmed her face, and she felt the weight of her decision. Here goes nothing, she murmured, dropping the letter into the box. The sound of the letter falling felt like a small victory. As she walked back to her garden, Leora felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. She glanced at the flowers around her, and for the first time, she saw them not just as a refuge, but as a symbol of her own growth. I am ready for whatever comes next, she said to the flowers, a smile spreading across her face. With Eloise's wisdom guiding her, Leora took a deep breath. She was ready to embrace love, to seize the day, and to live her life with purpose. The garden, once a quiet sanctuary, now buzzed with the energy of her renewed spirit, and Leora felt truly alive. Leora stood in her garden, the air filled with the scents of blooming flowers and the earthy smell of autumn leaves. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as she prepared for the visit of her former love, Daniel. The garden, a place of growth and healing, felt like the perfect backdrop for their reunion. It was here, among the vibrant colors and the gentle rustle of leaves, that she hoped to find clarity. As she waited, Leora thought about the many changes in her life since discovering Eloise's letters. The words of the long-lost woman echoed in her mind, urging her to embrace love and live fully. This is my chance, Leora whispered to herself, brushing her fingers over the petals of a nearby rose. She could feel her heart racing as she heard footsteps approaching. Leora? Daniel's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to see him standing at the entrance of the garden, a hesitant smile on his face. He looked older, with a few strands of gray in his hair, but the warmth in his eyes was familiar. "Daniel," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so glad you came." As he stepped further into the garden, Leora felt a wave of nostalgia wash over her. Memories of their younger days flooded her mind, the laughter, the dreams, and the occasional tears. They had shared so much, yet time had pulled them apart. "This place looks beautiful," Daniel said, glancing around. "You've really made it your own." "Thank you," Leora said, her cheeks warming. "It's been a journey, but this garden has helped me find myself again." She gestured for him to sit on a bench, nestled among the flowers. "I wanted to talk to you about something important." Daniel nodded, his expression turning serious. "I'm listening." Taking a deep breath, Leora shared the story of Eloise with him, the letters, the struggles, and the lessons she had learned. As she spoke, she could see Daniel's interest grow. "Eloise faced so much pain, but she taught me how to embrace love despite the fear," Leora explained. "I realized that I need to be honest about my feelings." "Your feelings?" Daniel asked, his brow furrowing with curiosity. "What do you mean?" Leora hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding. "I mean, I've missed you, Daniel. I've thought about us a lot over the years. I let fear keep me from reaching out before, but Eloise's story made me realize how important it is to express what's in my heart." "I've missed you too, Leora," he admitted, his voice softening. "Life has taken us in different directions, but I've never forgotten the time we shared. I often wonder what would have happened if we had fought harder for each other." The air between them felt charged with unspoken words, a mix of hope and uncertainty. Leora took a moment to gather her thoughts. "Do you believe it's possible to find our way back to something beautiful? Something worth exploring again?" Daniel's gaze held hers, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. "I want to believe that. I want to explore this connection again." He reached out, his hand brushing against hers. "But I also know that life isn't simple. We have to be honest about what we want." Leora nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her. "I want to take the risk, Daniel. I want to be brave, like Eloise. I want to see where this can go." A smile broke across Daniel's face, and Leora felt her heart lift. "Then let's take that risk together. We owe it to ourselves to see what's possible." As they sat together in the garden, Leora felt a sense of peace wash over her. The connection between them felt stronger than ever, filled with the promise of new beginnings. She had opened her heart, ready to embrace vulnerability, and in that moment, she knew that love was worth pursuing. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Leora felt hopeful. "Let's make this a journey worth remembering," she said softly, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Daniel smiled back, and it felt like the first step into a new chapter of their lives had begun. Together, they would navigate the complexities of love, loss, and the beauty of second chances. Leora stood in her garden, a sense of excitement bubbling inside her. The sun shone brightly, casting a warm glow over the colorful flowers that danced in the gentle breeze. Today was special. She had decided to host a gathering to celebrate her journey of self-discovery. Friends and family would come to witness the beauty of her garden, a place that had become a symbol of her growth. As Leora arranged the chairs and laid out refreshments, she felt a mix of nerves and joy. She had invited everyone who mattered to her, hoping to share not just her garden, but also the story of Eloise. "This is going to be perfect," she whispered to herself, glancing at the vibrant blooms that surrounded her. The first guests arrived, and Leora greeted them with a warm smile. "Welcome, I'm so glad you could make it," she said, hugging her closest friend Maya. "I hope you're ready for some stories." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Maya replied, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "I've heard so much about this Eloise. I can't wait to hear more." More friends and family trickled in, laughter and chatter filling the air. Leora felt her heart swell as she watched them mingle. They admired her garden, commenting on the colors and scents that enveloped them. "It's like a fairy tale here," one of her cousins exclaimed, bending down to smell a cluster of roses. "Thank you. It means a lot to me," Leora replied, her cheeks flushing with pride. She had worked hard to create this space, and now it felt like a reflection of her journey. As everyone settled down, Leora took a deep breath. "I want to share something important today," she began, her voice steady. "It's about a woman named Eloise, whose letters changed my life." The crowd grew quiet, their attention focused on her. Leora held up the first letter, the paper worn and delicate. This letter was written by Eloise many years ago. It speaks of love, loss, and the courage to choose one's own path. She read aloud, her voice carrying the words of Eloise across the garden. "I have learned that life is too short to linger in the shadows of fear. We must embrace love, even when it feels impossible." As she finished reading, the audience sat in thoughtful silence. "That's beautiful," Maya whispered, wiping a tear from her eye. "It really makes you think about your own choices." Leora nodded, feeling a connection with her friends as they reflected on the words. Eloise faced many challenges, but she taught me that we all have the power to shape our own stories. I want each of you to think about your own legacies today. What choices will you make moving forward? As the gathering continued, Leora encouraged her guests to share their own stories. One by one, they opened up. An elderly neighbor spoke of the love she once lost during the war, her voice trembling with emotion. "I never thought I would find love again, but life had other plans," she said, smiling through her tears. Another friend shared how she had taken a leap of faith and started her own business after years of doubt. "Eloise's words resonate with me," she admitted. "It's time to live boldly, just like she did." Leora beamed with pride as her friends connected over their shared experiences. The gathering became a tapestry of stories, woven together by love and resilience. She felt the warmth of their support wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the garden, Leora gathered everyone's attention once more. "Thank you all for being here and for sharing your stories," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Today, I have embraced my past, and I step boldly into my future, knowing I am not alone." The guests erupted into applause, and Leora smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. She realized that her garden, once a refuge for her solitary thoughts, had transformed into a vibrant symbol of renewal and hope. It embodied not only her journey, but also the legacies of Eloise and everyone present. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Leora felt a sense of peace wash over her. She knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would carry the lessons of love, courage, and connection with her. The garden would forever be a reminder of the beauty that comes from embracing one's true self. Share this story if you believe that love and resilience can transform our lives in unexpected ways. Leave a comment about a moment of self-discovery that changed your perspective, and subscribe for more inspiring tales like this one.